And I think people spend too much time focused on this idea of finding their passion. Screw that. I wasn't passionate about phones, but what I was passionate about was solving problems for entrepreneurs.
David Hauser.
David Hauser.
Please help me in welcoming David Hauser from Grasshopper to the stage.
David Hauser is author of the book Unstoppable and a serial entrepreneur who founded Grasshopper, Chargerify, and Vanilla. His track record includes exiting one of his startups for almost $200 million, securing investment from Mark Cuban, and being an angel investor at over 100 startups.
When we started Grasshopper, we had a very simple vision. How do we build a great company that we want to be at? I genuinely believe you cannot teach people to be entrepreneurs.
Then what is the core? Like, what is the unteachable thing?
So
While you were building this business, what was happening in your life?
I'm 50 pounds overweight. I'm not sleeping. I feel terrible. This can't continue forever. What we really want is to feel good and have joy, but sometimes we have to slow down if we want those pieces of life.
The Icon's a show where we learn life lessons from those who may shape the icon in each of us. And today I'm excited to explore what it takes to build a successful business while also building a successful life. You've brought up your kids a couple of times. What do you feel like is the one lesson you hope they learn and never forget?
If I had to pick anything, it's
David Hauser, welcome to the Icons by Motiversity.
Tyler, thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure. I mean, I've had a chance to learn a bit more about your story and your business background. It's been a fascinating ride you've been on. And I think what's interesting is that I introduced you as an incredibly successful entrepreneur, which you are, but you ended up writing a book on health and life. And I think that's really interesting. Like if you've got $100 million, that's a pretty convincing hook for a book, yet you decided to write about self-discovery, health. Why that path?
Yeah, it's a great question. Like I think I would have had a more successful book, right, commercially, if I had written about like my grasshopper journey or 7 rules for life or something like that. But to be quite honest with you, like I wanted to share my journey that was very difficult in being overweight and struggling with kind of that identity and self, and seeing like I was very successful, but I struggled internally. Right? And like, how do we overcome that? And how do you find the optimizations in life to get better and better? Right? And that was a 10-year plus journey that was just very difficult, but very rewarding.
Yeah, I find that so fascinating. I think it's that moment in life that we all probably run into at some point where you can have really singular goals or simple goals that look like numbers in a bank account or something, but there's almost no getting around the life moment that says like, okay, is this all adding up? Like, is this worth it? Is it feeling right? And I once heard you say that having more money almost means less happiness. Why do you think that is?
So I think that what people don't understand about money is after a certain point, it just becomes more complex, right? Like once we have what we need, like for years, I mean, way before I sold my company, I lived in a nice enough house. I had a nice car. I could go on vacation. I could do those things. Like beyond that, it doesn't really matter, right? Like you can't spend very much more. I still have the same car that I had then. And it just becomes more complex. So now there's estate planning and capital allocations and all of these complexities that just add up again and again and again. And I think it actually diminishes from happiness, right? And you can get very wrapped up in that because it's easy to do, right? Like, oh, okay, I got to worry about this. I got to worry about that. It's super easy to just get lost in that.
Yeah, I think it's, I heard you mention a quote once, being the richest person in the cemetery. It's one of those like kind of classic ideas of, again, we can have all these successes, but not at the core level, having it add up. And that's pretty fascinating that you still drive the same car. Like obviously, lots of monetary success, but still kind of keeping the same, principles or lifestyle that you did before.
Yeah, and like, look, I had a phase in life, I think earlier than some, where I had fancy cars and I probably wasted money on that, right? It probably just happened a little bit earlier in life, but I quickly realized like those things don't matter, right? And I actually love my car. I bought a new car last year and getting rid of it because I just like my old car a lot better, right? Like so it's not necessarily about like, I don't want to spend money, but I don't want to spend money on things that don't matter, right? And one of our family core values is experiences over things. And we try to live that consistently with our kids and within our lives, right? So like I'll spend seemingly unlimited amount of money on traveling and going places and doing things and experiences, and the same 400 black t-shirts that don't matter, because like that's not an important thing in life, right?
I mean, we line up pretty well there. I remember I'm the uncle that doesn't buy gifts. I buy experiences for those in my family. And so I think there's an age where that just isn't cool. And then all of a sudden it becomes kind of fun, but I can appreciate that. Like the things that do matter, and, everyone gets to define that, or every family gets to define that. But once you do, just stay pretty clear on that. I think one of the big almost storylines that we've jumped over, I've kind of alluded to this success of building Grasshopper, selling it. Can you just share that story for those who are new to your work or your background? How did you end up where you are today?
Yeah, it was actually quite an interesting journey. Like I always knew at a super young age that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like way, way back, I struggled with reading and writing pretty significantly, was years behind my peers, had to go to tutoring 5 days a week. And luckily my family had the resources both from school and tutoring to help me understand how to learn, like how do I learn? So I had that privilege quite early on in life, but I still knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. Like there was no other path in my life. Like I didn't consider anything else, even to the extreme. Like I started a few companies in high school. One of them was actually quite successful. I considered not going to college and just staying in this was the kind of 1999, 2000. So kind of the internet boom and then bust. I experienced all of that in New York, and decided like, I'm not going to go to school, college, right? And my mom's like, you're an idiot. You have to go to college. And not necessarily just for the education, but for the experience and maturing. And she was definitely right. But what really, I only wanted to go to one college, Babson College. I only applied to two, and I think the second one was just to appease my mom, because she's like, you can't only apply to one college. And I put all of my resources into getting in that college. I probably shouldn't have been able to get in based on my grades and SAT scores, but I tried everything possible. I went to 7 or 10 different open houses. I went to multiple tours. I got a recommendation letter from a friend of a friend who was a professor, like everything just so I could get in. And ultimately they said no. They then accepted me for a second semester, freshman year, because they know people drop out. So they're like, you're going to be kind of our second bench player. We're going to bring you in second semester. And that's how I got into Babson.
No way. I mean, I want to get into the entrepreneurial story, it started at Babson, or the Grasshopper story that started there. But, we've got one of the largest student channels on YouTube, Motivation to Study. And I think this is one of the constant questions people face, and almost like a tug of war within them, is that they feel like, I don't know if school is helping me at a post-secondary level or if it's just slowing me down. Like, why was it important for you to do that, even though you were already, forming success as an entrepreneur?
So I get asked this a lot about Babson because Babson is very focused on entrepreneurship, right? And I genuinely believe you cannot teach people to be entrepreneurs. So this is a really difficult conundrum for a school that focuses on entrepreneurship, right? But the skill set that they were able to help me develop made me a better entrepreneur later in life. And there's two types of people that come out of Babson. One set, smaller group of people that are entrepreneurs, a larger group of people that are entrepreneurs within large companies. And that is just as entrepreneurial. It's just a different path. But like if I look back at the things that Babson taught me, how to read a P&L statement effectively, how to do negotiations, how to hire and fire, how to interview, those are skills you can teach. And those were actually super effective. And I don't know another place that I could have learned them at the same pace. So yes, I could have learned them, but it would have been at a much slower pace. So I think that's where college, or that very focused time in life, is effective.
And that's where Grasshopper started, was it not, at Babson?
Yeah, it was. So that was my sophomore year. Ultimately, I ran the company junior and senior year full time while also going to school. So consolidated my schedule to 2 to 3 days a week in school and the rest of the time in the office. And really spent that time focused on building the company while studying too. And we experienced success very quickly. We went from 0 to $1 million of revenue very, very fast, and had to start hiring and learning all sorts of things that we didn't know. But it was just because we were building something for a genuine need. Like, we built this for ourselves. We were entrepreneurs, me and my business partner, that wanted a phone system, press 1 for sales, 2 for support, all that stuff, super easy. So we weren't on our cell phones, didn't exist, and we just built it.
Oh, interesting. So that's what the core of Grasshopper was?
Yeah, very simple. Like, this technology had been around forever. It wasn't special, it wasn't unique, but it was also before, Twilio and cloud computing. So our first year, I spent building data centers and physically plugging cables into T1 lines and doing all that stuff in a data center because we had no other option. That was how you had to build things. But it worked out, and we spent all of our time and money on marketing. Every dollar we made went back into marketing to scale the company.
And when you say you're a firm believer that entrepreneurship can't really be taught, then what is the core? Like, what is the unteachable thing?
I think the unteachable thing is a desire to understand and balance risks. What I think people misunderstand about entrepreneurship is we aren't inherently risky or people that like to take risks. We like to take risks when we understand the reward, and the reward is larger than the risk. And that's something that you can't really teach. It's just inside of you or it's not. And people that don't understand that, maybe they can run a small business over time, right? But to be an entrepreneur and scale something up, I think that's the difference between just running a small company, which I think a lot of people can do, and being an entrepreneur and scaling a business. You have to love and live in that risk-reward scenario compared to what people think, which is all risk.
And so has that stuck with you, or do you feel like there was a moment in your life where you were that was the perfect moment to be able to balance risk the way that was helpful to grow a business that fast?
So I definitely still live in that every day. Like, it's just who I am as part of my core, right? I think the risk reward calculation is different now, right? I'm looking at different things in different sizes and stuff like that. So would I be able to grow Grasshopper the same way I did back then today? No, but that's just because I'm in a different phase of life compared to changing the internal part of me, which is like, I see a problem, I want to fix it. And the first reaction after understanding, identifying the problem is, okay, what does it take to get there? What's the risk and how big is the reward? Like, that's the next step.
And that's the calculation. So, I think about all the people who tune into our shows. Entrepreneurship is one of the core drivers. People who are thinking about building a business that can transform their life, the lives of other people. What's the most, powerful advice that you would offer that group? Is it just that risk reward calculation, or is it something else?
So it's actually something else very differently. I think the risk reward calculation is important over time and understanding and living in that discomfort. But if I'm giving advice, it's just go out and do something. Like, take that next step. There's so many people I talk to that get stuck, right? And where do they get stuck? It's like, okay, I need a business plan. I need to do this. I need a first customer. Yeah, okay, right? But like, how about just call someone and ask them, do you want this service, right? Like, after that, will you pay me for this? Like, little steps along that journey. That's the advice that I think is most powerful compared to worrying about all the other stuff. It will all come in time. Just do any little step to move forward. Otherwise, a year from now, we're going to have the same conversation. I don't know what to do next.
Oh, that's interesting, because I mean, two things are coming to mind. A, just the power of that initiation and how you can stand on the sidelines for just so long, and without that first step, what's occurred. But I've also heard you talk about, and it's a phrase we believe in, it's actually on the wall of our Motiversity office, which is great things take time. And so it's that combination of, initiating the first step, but also recognizing that there's a long game here. Like, why do you think that kind of long game or that perspective is helpful as well?
So this really plays into how we built Grasshopper. When we started, we had no intention of ever selling it, right? So when we thought about and sat down and said, okay, we're going to start taking those steps, it wasn't with an exit in mind. It was, how do we build a great company that we want to be at? And that just made us a better company. We ultimately sold it 12 years later, right? So people look at this success and they're like, overnight success or whatever. Yeah, 12 years, like more than a decade of time went into building that company to make it what it was. And it still was very immature, right? Like in 12 years, we still only did a tenth of what we were thinking about, right? And I think that that's the important piece. Like every day we showed up and said, we want to build something that we love. That's it. Now, the result of that was a highly profitable company in an interesting market that someone wanted to acquire, but that wasn't the goal. And I think when you do it the other way and you think about like who's going to acquire this, what's the exit plan, all of those pieces, you actually end up with a crappy business that then has to be acquired, right? Where we went into those conversations like, guys, we have no desire to sell this and we don't need to sell this forever.
So if you were starting again, and if you didn't have the track record, if you didn't have the capital that you have, you were just, at your stage of life, still passionate about entrepreneurship, like what would you do tomorrow?
I'd find anyone to pay me for whatever I believed I was solving a problem for, right? Like, I don't even care what the problem is. Like, most likely I'm going to find the wrong problem to start out with, but very quickly in the path of finding people to pay me for that. Not say I will pay you in the future, but like pay me today to solve that problem. I'll figure out if that's right or wrong. And that's really what we did with Grasshopper, right? Like we built something that we thought was a problem. We went out to the market and said, pay us for this. The way we priced it was wrong. The software was terrible. Everything about it was wrong. But we said, we're going to solve this problem. Are you willing to pay me? And people said yes. So over time, the software got better. We understood how to package it, how to market it, how to make it look nice, all of those pieces. But like the first software, just for reference, we didn't even have a web interface. You could sign up online and then you had to set it up over the phone, right? Like we started at the base level and said like, how do we just deliver what we say we're going to solve for, which is a better phone experience for small businesses to make them look professional. That's what we did. And people paid us. We then said, hey, will you pay me $10 more a month so you can do this online? People said yes, and we built the online part.
Oh, that's fascinating. You see, you hear about that, like focus on a problem or solve your own problem kind of advice with entrepreneurship. And so it sounds like, obviously that's key, but really more fundamental to that is somebody paying you for that solution. And almost build like, the belief that probably where we're starting with this problem is the wrong place to start. But if someone's willing to pay, at least it gives us some runway and then we'll find a more valuable problem.
Yeah, and I don't care about features. I don't care about any of those things. Like, will someone pay me to solve this problem? That's it, right? And I think people spend too much time focused on this idea of finding their passion. Like, screw that. I wasn't passionate about phones. Like, I don't know how anyone could really be passionate about telecom and phones, right? But what I was passionate about was solving problems for entrepreneurs. So I was happy to solve any problem I possibly could for entrepreneurs. This is the one that we identified and then tested and iterated on very quickly to find like, is this the right problem, right? But if I said, find my passion, well, that could have been health. Well, I don't know if that's what entrepreneurs actually wanted to solve at that time. Maybe today they do, but we understood that and then learned how to do the thing we were doing, the telecom, the phones, the servers we needed, whatever it was, right?
No way. The start, I appreciate kind of the clarity that you offer in terms of like what it takes or what you do as a first step. But then there's also the hard part, like just maybe you've even found a great mountain to climb, but it's still a mountain to climb. There's a lot of people who listen to our podcast, listen to our show, who are in that journey. Like, maybe somebody is paying them, but not paying them as much as they hope. Or maybe just the business has got some potential, but they're still on that pathway. Like, what would you say to somebody who's still in that grind?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the most important thing is to figure out, how do I get my customers to refer other people? For me, that was always the most important metric and factor. Like, I knew I could spend more money on marketing. I knew I could do more activities. But the most important piece was, will my customers tell their peers about what we're doing? And each time that we tweaked and we kind of built around that, that's when we've discovered the kind of next steps of growth. And so many times in our journey, we plateaued, right? Like if it was at $1 million, at 5 million, 10 million, like those are kind of the typical tiers. We plateaued and we sat there as an executive team and said, you know what? We've saturated the market. We can't grow anymore. And we told ourselves this story and this narrative to make it feel comfortable, when in reality, what we should have been pushing and saying is, no. Like, what are the things that our customers are asking for us to do next? How do we get them to tell their peers about us? We started to change our mind and think about that. We grew again and again. Ultimately, before we sold, we were at $30 million a year revenue. Now the company today does about $100 million. So all of those stories we told ourselves were false until we started asking those questions.
Oh, that really like strikes a chord for me. I'm sure other people too, but just that flip of, again, there's an easy story that's probably getting me caught somewhere at this plateau. But if I flip it towards, my customers, those who are external to our group, like what would they say? And what would make them so excited that they'd tell somebody else? It's a pretty clarifying question, isn't it?
It is. And the other piece that always fits into that narrative for us was, we always said, hey, we've saturated the market. And it's easy to tell ourselves that when it becomes hard, when it's hard to market, when it's hard to find the next customer. And that just means that we need to find new marketing methods, new channels, new ways, because there's no way that at our size we saturated anything, right? There are hundreds of thousands of new companies every month being formed. Like, we're talking to 1/100th of that, if that, right? So we told ourselves this narrative. And I remember sitting in the room when we started the company. We had a very different name. It was terrible. It wasn't Grasshopper. And we said to ourselves, we can't change the name. We spent so much money on marketing. There's no way. Why would we change the name now? And when we reframed it and said, okay, how much are we going to spend on marketing in the next 10 years compared to the last 5 years? The number was astronomically larger. We're like, okay, well, now we understand that number before was holding us back. It's not meaningful. What we're really going to spend is to the future. How do we run radio ads? How do we do things when our company name is Got Vmail? Like, terrible. Like, I spent half my life spelling it out to people because it sounded like gov and whatever else, right? 50% of a 30-second radio ad was spelling out the domain name. So like, those were the things that were holding us back. But until we reframed it, we would have just sat there and said, no, we spent too much. We can't. There's no way you can change it. But we did change it.
I mean, like I said, that's, I think, just probably for my team, just, number of people who are in that story, even that saturation story. I think that's a really fascinating just challenge point. Now, what's been interesting as I've done research into your background is that, so there's the business side, obviously lots of success. And then you've also just been really honest and transparent about the personal side. Just like, what does that mean to be building a business, to be giving that much to a business? Like, what's the trade-off potentially, or how do you manage that from a life perspective? So while you were building this business, obviously finding ways through these plateaus, what was happening in your life?
Yeah, so I think about it as cycles, right? And they're not all positive or negative. They have bits of both, where those cycles kind of go up and down. And when I was starting the company, I had very little balance in life, and I actually don't believe in work-life balance at all. I believe in work-life integration, but it was definitely far on an extreme. I stayed up until 3, 4 in the morning working. I didn't sleep well. I ate terribly, and that had negative consequences, but also had positive, right? Like, I was able to scale a company and not have to hire as many people, like all those things. So it's a balance over time, not a work-life balance, but a balance in that cycle. Now, when I kind of swung too far, I then realized, hey, like, I'm 50 pounds overweight. I'm not sleeping. I feel terrible. Everything hurts. This can't continue forever. And that was really the start of that journey. Now, my original start on that journey was probably pretty terrible too, since I decided I'm going to run a marathon and do Ironmans, just as bad on the other extreme. Right?
Yeah. Let's take a busy business schedule and add the busiest training schedule all at the same time. Yeah.
All together, right? 100+ mile bike rides multiple times a week and such. But my life has always been extremes, and I'm okay with that. I don't know if the others in my life like it as much, but when I do something, it's all or nothing. Same way when I discovered yoga, right? Like, went to one class, went to 10 classes, did a 200-hour teacher training, in a very short period of time. That was like order of magnitude, a few months. But I find what I like and I do it.
I mean, the work-life balancing, so that's pretty fascinating. I mean, my background is studying work. And so, that would go against the grain for a lot of kind of like common thinking out there with this work-life balance. So would you say that belief for you that it's not about balance, it's about integration, is that based on your personality kind of searching for these extremes? Or do you feel like that's just a really effective way to think of it for all people?
So I don't like to say for anything for all people, but yeah, I think for the majority of people, I think it's the right path, because otherwise we spend so much time looking for balance that we actually lose out on both sides of it. Like we spend all this time trying to find balance rather than taking the steps and the activities to just do it. And when you do integration, there's much less rules, right? And I think where we fall down is we have these rules like, I get home, I can't work. Because that's the cut point. No, I'm on vacation, I should not work. No, like I actually believe that the first few hours a day on vacation are some of my most productive days. No one's bothering me, it's quiet. The kids aren't awake, so it doesn't matter. It's not affecting my engagement with them. But I have very dedicated quiet time that doesn't have meetings scheduled. So I actually love that time, right? And if I had a hard rule of like on vacation, I don't use the computer, it doesn't feel comfortable and it doesn't feel productive. So I would much prefer to have that integration. The same way, like I'll bring my kids on work trips. Those are some of our best trips. Like we can always go on vacation and go to Hawaii or do whatever, and it's fun, right? But like in September, I'm going to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, taking my middle daughter out of school, taking her with me for a week and a half. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing trip that we never would have experienced otherwise. That's what integration means to me.
So it sounds like it's much more almost like customized, but as opposed to prescribing to predefined rules or kind of setting these lines in the sand, just almost really finding what works for you, recognizing that may shift over time, but by actively asking that question, like what's the right way to operate here, it sounds like that's the approach.
And also being present in your feelings of like, do I feel stressed this week? Where did that stress come from? Was it too many meetings stacked? Okay, I'm going to break meetings up a little bit. Okay, was it too many days out of the office? Like for me, that's one of the things that causes the most stress. If I have, 3 out of 5 days in a week where I had out of office meetings compared to Zoom meetings, because I can stack them and I can get through more of them, like that causes stress for me. So I communicate to my assistant, hey, look, I only want to take for the next month 1 day out of the office. Make sure you do it only 1 day a week and stack everything else, right? Like, but you have to be present in those feelings and authentic and say, hey, I actually feel stressed because of this, rather than this week is stressful, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. And it kind of goes back to that self-awareness part. I've heard you talk about a couple of things that, because what's interesting is people sometimes ask me, like, why is the show called The Icons? Like, does that mean you need to have a platinum album or you need to be a Hall of Famer? And really, that's not the defining factor for us. When we think about who to interview on the show, it's people who have had kind of transformative success over time. And it's that time piece that's really interesting, because you can have the one successful rocket, but if you've done it numerous times, now you've got some kind of system that like sits below that. And I'm always fascinated by that system, because that system's had to deal with pressure at higher and higher levels. It's had to deal with time constraints. It's had to deal with all sorts of stuff. And so when you start describing this work-life integration, like, for some people that may just sound like a word choice that you've made, but what it is it like really hyper self-awareness of what works for you and building that system to say, this isn't just one time. I've got to keep doing this over and over again. And I find that really fascinating.
I think what's really important there too is understanding the support systems that go below that, right? So like I mentioned my assistant, but there's a ton of support systems that go into that. The processes, the playbooks, the things that make that work and be successful. And that's across an entire organization, right? So it's not just my assistant that has those processes and playbooks. It's all of those pieces. It's how do you create that framework again and again, no matter what the company's doing. It doesn't matter if it's telecom or SaaS or direct to consumer, it makes no difference, right? Like, how do we redo those processes and keep them working, and create a really tight feedback loop, right? Like, hey, this is what's working now, and not wait until the end of the quarter. Like, this is on a weekly basis. We're talking about these things. So feedback is really fast.
Interesting. And it sounds like, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs or business people that get pretty dialed in on that front. Like they've got the playbooks, they've got the processes, like that's where they focus their time. But it sounds like what you've done as well is think about that same approach, but for life. Like with the book Unstoppable, it's almost like you use that business approach to say, okay, let's investigate my own life and try to figure out those playbooks and processes. So what have you discovered on that side?
Yeah, so it was a really interesting journey. And my first discovery was me, and I think most people actually feel pretty shitty in general, and we just don't know it, right? Like over time, we've just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And we're like, that's the new normal. And that's how I felt. I'm like, I don't feel bad. Like this, I feel fine, right? But when I started doing the opposite and saying, what are the small improvements that I can make? One tiny improvement today, one tiny improvement today. When you start stacking those again and again and again, you're like, wow, a year ago, I felt really terrible, right? And that process doesn't have to ever end. You can keep optimizing that cycle again and again, just like we do in our business. If it's in our marketing channels, if it's in our operations, our customer service, it doesn't matter. We keep getting better and better. We can do that in life. And that was really the first discovery for me that said, hey, I don't need to feel crappy. And there is a better way to do this. Along that journey, discovered a lot of things, spent way too much money, and learned that most of the things are free and easy. But that was a journey I had to go on myself, even if someone told me that, to be honest with you.
And, you know, it seems like one of the almost assumptions that's built into what you're describing here is this, long game approach. Like I've heard you bring up terms that I'm a fan of, like deep work or long work. Like, why does that kind of like long game approach, again, going back to the great things take time kind of quote, but why does that help make sense of that like 1% day by day approach?
So I think it's hard in our culture that we're always chasing the easy thing, right? The quick fix, right? The scrolling on the phone, the quick hit of dopamine, all of those pieces, where what we really want is to feel good, be happy, and have joy. Those are hard and take time and are difficult, right? It really matters to slow down sometimes. I go fast as anyone else, but sometimes we have to slow down if we want those pieces of life, right? And I find, how do I slow down in my life if it's an hour a day? And I don't meditate. I do yoga for an hour, and that's my brain quiet time. And I try to do that every single day. But again, like that's slowing down and getting back to how do I feel? What's going on right now? And that takes a long time to get comfortable with. Like at first, it's really uncomfortable. Over time, it feels better and better.
So when you're kind of dialing in for a focused work session, like what does that mean? What do you do? What environment do you create? Like how do you actually set up to be effective?
So I actually start before that. And for me, it's routine and calendar and schedule, right? So rather than, for me, I don't really focus on like the actual prep work before getting in there. I say, how do I make sure my calendar is set up to naturally push me into that? To make sure that I have dedicated work time. I write a weekly email newsletter, like that's on my calendar because I know that I have to spend time. I read all week, but I have to spend time like digesting that in my mind, thinking about what I want to write, actually writing it. That's work that can't be interrupted with phone calls and emails and things like that. So I could try all sorts of tactics to get there. Or for me, I just schedule on my calendar the 2 hours blocked out on 2 days each week that puts me in that space again and again. And I know that it's always happening on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. It got moved actually today for our recording, but my assistant moved it right on the calendar. But my brain kind of then knows, right? And again, that calendaring and routine for me is what frees me up. I don't have to worry about, do I need to be productive now, later, or whatever. It's in the calendar and it's going to happen.
When you were talking about your early days building businesses, still doing it to this day, one of the things that I heard you describe was the role that almost the vision you had then played into it. Like you had bad software, you had a lot of things that you probably look back now and said like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe we were starting a successful business with that. But somehow you're able to kind of paint this picture for people. What role does that play in business or in life? That ability to kind of create a future that's just really enticing for yourself and others.
Yeah, it's important to think about two pieces of that. One, vision, and then core values. And I think that core values are super important, both in a company, but also personally. Like I mentioned, one of our family core values, but those are really important because that's directionally where we're going. And vision we can change and we can develop and we can mature over time. So when we started Grasshopper, we had a very simple vision, like we're going to solve this problem for entrepreneurs. Midway through that journey, we actually discovered that our vision and our mission was empowering entrepreneurs to succeed. Like that's what, when we got up out of bed in the morning, said, oh my God, like this is what we can get excited about. This is what our people can get excited about. And it didn't mean anything about phone systems, but we were able to help entrepreneurs do better in their business every day, right? And that's something to get excited about. And it also allowed us to stop this very typical pattern of kind of feature chasing when you're in software as a service. It's very easy to be like, wow, the next thing they need, we need to do this. We came out with text messaging for our customers 5 years after our competitors. 5 years. The only reason we actually introduced it is because we asked our customers, how much are you willing to pay? When they said they were willing to pay for it, and this was the problem we were going to solve, which is some automated responses and making them sound more professional rather than just having text messaging, then we added it. And it became a multi-million-dollar a year business on adding that feature. But we were years behind because our vision was very clear. We're only going to do what empowers entrepreneurs to succeed, and we're going to listen to them.
And it's so, because I find this fascinating. I find like, these are the words that businesses know now. Like they know vision, they know core values, they know purpose or mission, but where they get stuck oftentimes is like, well, what do I do with that on a Wednesday? And so how did you make that feel alive on a Wednesday so that people actually did feel excited about it?
Yeah, so I think that at the highest level, it's integrating all of those values into hiring, firing, rewards, recognition, and discipline, right? So like that's at the highest level. It needs to be integrated across the board. And it's more than putting the stuff up on the wall and having some fun stuff, right? And what that meant for us at Grasshopper was getting to a point that we were comfortable enough saying, hey, we're sitting in our conference room here. I guarantee you can walk outside, ask any employee at random our core values. They will not only be able to tell you them, that's easy. Now you could just drill it into people, but they'll be able to tell you a story either about them or about one of their peers about what that means to live that core value. And we had to have a lot of confidence to say that because it was actually integrated across all of those categories. But to drop down a level and be very specific, because I think this is a really great example, how does that, like on a day-to-day basis, how does someone deal with that? For us in customer service, this was always a great example. We would get customers calling our 24/7 customer support and saying, hey, I have a problem. Typical problem, happens many times. I printed business cards and I, the customer, put the wrong phone number on it. And they're asking us for a refund, right? Rather than give a rule that says this is what we do, we always said every single credit, refund or credit that went into the system had to be tied to a core value. And we gave no limits. We said, hey, you use your judgment as long as it's tied to a core value. And whatever the credits were, like someone could pay us $10 a month and we'd give them a $200 credit for their business cards because that rep tied it to a core value and said, I want to go above and beyond for this customer. I want to be always entrepreneurial. Like, so those were some of our values, spelled out Gary. So go above and beyond, always entrepreneurial, radically passionate, your team. Tie it to that and then give any credit you want that relates, right? So like that's how you then push that down a layer and tie it back to the customer.
I mean, this is early days for this stuff. I mean, the last 10 years talking about core values, that's like, the standard approach, but you're talking about 2004, 5 up to 15. I mean, this this is early stuff. Where did you just kind of uncover that was an important piece of growing a business? Was that something you learned at Babson? Like, where did you learn that was going to be so important to the overall success?
So we learned because we made all the mistakes and had none of them when we started. So when we started, we're just doing whatever, right? Now, I think that the first 10 or 15 people we hired had our core values inherently because we did all of the hiring and interviews and such, but we never talked about them. They were not written down. They were not, talked about in the interview process, where if you fast forward 10 years into the company, we asked people before they even got to an interview, here are our core values. Give me at least 3 stories about how you've lived these in your life. Like, that was before you showed up for an interview. Like, that was the pre-screening, right? So like, that was a maturing process over time. 1, writing them down, 2, integrating them, and then 3, actually using them. Where did we discover it? To be honest with you, we were deciding on frameworks for the business. We were struggling at one of those plateaus. We found a framework. One of the main pieces was core values. We doubled down on it and went all in on it, and then kind of developed our own process around it.
I mean, so when I say this is early days for that kind of language, I mean, in certain ways it is, in certain ways it's not. I mean, values and vision have been around in leadership since the start, like before we even had a word for this stuff, right? Like, we knew that.
Good's a great and Jim Collins' work, right? Like,
Yeah. But I think, in lots of places when it was kind of emerging organically, again, we didn't have the words for it, but we knew that there was a target we needed to have and lines we wouldn't cross as an organization and those kind of things. One of the things I've discovered, doing a bit of research into your story was that, again, you had already started some successful things. Grasshopper was already becoming a success. And then you went out and got a coach. Is that right? And why did you do that?
Yeah, so I believe that any great performance person, if it's an athlete, if it's a business person, like, if they need to perform at a high level, needs to have someone around them that's different than a mentor, right? A mentor is there to help with advice and kind of point in directions. A coach is there to ask hard questions and say, hey, I'm calling BS on that. Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, why are you doing that, right? And like, then also bring their previous experience from working with other high-performing people along that way. So we went out and said, how do I find the best coach possible for high-growth software companies? Like, who has done this many, many times? And we actually had 3 different coaches over time. So it wasn't just one that stayed forever. We developed core values, and we were at this kind of $10 million a year business. We grew a bunch. At $20 million, we had a different coach. At $30 million, we had a different coach. To find someone that's in those different areas, right? So like, think of that like sports. Your high school coach is definitely not the same as your college coach or your professional coach. They have different skill sets. They have different things they're working on with you. So like, that's how I think about coaching. And finding that right person is really hard.
How did you find them?
Well, people always ask that, right? So first, I identified a framework. I wanted to use Vern Harnish's, at the time it was called Rockefeller Habits. Now it's called Scaling Up. There's obviously been new versions of that with EOS and Traction and Gene, and it's kind of all the same thing, right? If you look back to the genesis of that, where that came from, it all came from the same place, which was kind of Ritz-Carlton, and then college pro painters kind of perfected this language and framework. And then it grew out from there. And I said, okay, I want the best coach within this framework, and I'm not going to accept anyone else. So I went to Vern and I said, tell me your best coach, period. A guy named Les from Canada, super nice guy. And we worked with him for a number of years. And I repeated that process as I decided if we're going to change the framework or not. But if you want the best person, you just have to go get them. Identify what that looks like. Same as when we're hiring someone. Hey, Tyler, we need to get a salesperson. Okay, sounds good. Let's identify the top 10 salespeople in this industry, and let's go get number 1. Forget about number 9 through whatever, right? Like, who cares? Let's go get number 1. And I think a coach should be the same way.
That kind of clarity is it's pretty grounding. Obviously you're describing kind of the lessons that you learned as you were going through it. And oftentimes, like, made a mistake, then figured it out because you had to. But What's the lesson that took you the longest to learn?
So this is going to sound silly, but the hardest and longest thing for sure was giving up control of my calendar. Like out of all of these things, I was able to delegate. I love doing it. I'm like, the less work I have to do, the more I can push down. I'm all about it. Sounds great. But my calendar was so emotionally tied to like control that for me, that was a skill I had to really hone and figure out how to give up control. Like that was hard. And that took me, way after selling Grasshopper. So, I don't know, 15, 20 years to give up control of my calendar. And the piece that I still have left is travel. I still tightly control travel. Like I have some playbooks for booking flights and some other things that I've defined out, but I still spend an inordinate amount of time on trips that probably is not productive or worth my time. But it's the last piece of control I have that I haven't given up.
As you say, calendar, I can feel myself like, I didn't expect that, but B, like that's me to a T still. I think that I connect with that so deeply. And I think part of it is because it's worked so well. Like I know it. I know that when it's in there, I can trust that I'm going to get to it. If I've got to move it, it means that I know what the trade-offs are. But that control piece, like oh boy, as you said that, you started Grasshopper when you were give or take 20 years old. Times have changed. What advice would you now give a 20-year-old?
I think the best advice I can give is really go all in. Like looking back at my time starting Grasshopper, it was really hard trying to do school and Grasshopper, but I'm glad I went all in on it at a time in life that I could take risks. Didn't have kids, didn't have commitments. If I didn't want to have a girlfriend, I didn't have to, right? Like all of those pieces allowed me to go all in. And every year in life that we are not all in, it becomes harder, right? Like there are more commitments in life. There's always a reason. There's always an excuse. There's a job. There's a relationship. There's kids. There's a house payment. Like earlier in life, those things don't exist. We can take bigger risks. So when we're on that risk reward scale, we can take a different type of risk than we can later in life. So for me, talking to someone young today is like, go all in as soon as you possibly can so you can reap those rewards later in life. And I think the mistake when people think about work-life balance, like that's why it's on this kind of scale and this, cycle over time. It shouldn't always be balanced, right? Like it should go through these times in life where you're on extremes, and that's okay if you identify what that extreme is and understanding that that's where you currently are placed in life.
Interesting. It's you can see why parents probably love that advice and also like recoil from it, like that all-in approach, right? At that age where
I'm sure I'm going to regret it when one of my kids tells me like I'm going all in
That's
on
right.
whatever it
That's
is.
right.
But I'm going to have to live by that and reward them for it. Like whatever it is, I'll support it for them, right? And they know very specifically like how I think about money. Like they'll have access to none of it, to be quite honest with you. They have to work hard in life and build things on their own. But if they tell me they're going all in something, like, okay, awesome. I'm going to have to support you in it.
I think that principle of just, you're going to have to work hard for what you achieve, regardless of kind of like what the success of your parents has been. I think, A, that's fascinating. And B, like, I'm curious, when you've brought up your kids a couple of times, like if you had to narrow it down, like, what do you feel like is the one lesson you hope they learn and never forget from you?
It's hard. If I had to pick anything, it's one of our core values, which is work hard and be nice. But really, I want them to learn all of our values. And so that's experiences over things. Catch people doing good things, right? Like don't focus on the negative, find the positive. How you do anything is how you do everything. Work hard, be nice. Life begins at the edge and the journey matters. So it's hard for me to pick one of those because to me, all of those matter the same amount, right? And I think to be a well-rounded person, and especially in our household, you have to live all of those. You can't live one of them, right? Like you can't just do a piece of it. So for me, like our success as parents is very much dedicated on how do we show our kids every day us living those values, right? Because we can talk about them, we can put them on the wall, but they need to see it, right? And that is not always easy. It's very hard most of the time, right? And that's our job as parents. There's nothing else we can do.
So those are your family values. Like that's how clearly you've described the values, the core values of your family.
Yeah. So that took us many years to get to. I probably did it way too late because I did this in, 10 companies first. I'm like, David, you can't keep doing this in companies and sitting in executive team meetings and building core values and, thinking about how you wordsmith them and how you put them into play and not do it at home, right? And the easiest one for our household to live is experiences over things. The kids can tell you that one right away. They're still young, so our youngest is 6 turning 7 and 10, middle is kind of 10 turning 11, right? So they understand the other ones, but they can't verbalize them the same yet. And to me, that's part of the process. Like they're seeing us live them, and over time, they'll start to be able to verbalize them and use that in their vernacular and pieces like that. That's the next step in the maturity of those values within our family.
I wonder how many parents listening right now just really heard that. Like, what's interesting is that we reach a lot of youth through our channels, but who listens to these conversations is oftentimes a lot of parents. And I think that there's probably a reason for that. Like trying to, understand it. Maybe it's speaking to a stage of life that they're at. Maybe it's speaking to a stage of life that I'm at. I'm not sure, but a lot of times families will talk about core values. They'll know the word, they'll know that values are important, but it's generalized. Like it's a general question. Is that living up to our values, or is that aligned to our values? But to have them that clearly defined, I think is really fascinating. And then to recognize that it's going to be a journey of discovery as to what that means for each of them at different ages. And as a family, probably we're going to keep defining what these mean. That's really powerful.
I really think about these like these should be able to be chapters in a book, right? The same way that you can define it with a title and then a bunch of stories that kind of build up to that chapter, right? That's how these values should exist, and that's how strong they should be. Over time, our family should naturally have a book of these stories, and we should be able to point back and each person within the family say, you know what? That one reminds me of this story when David did this or whatever it was, right? And if you think about it as a book, I think that's how you build power behind it and build it up. Like the most powerful things that we have in life are always story-based. And you have to make core values the same way. They need to be story-based. They can't just be words on the paper. They need to be identifiable and point to a thing that happened in your life where you lived that value, your parent lived that value, your sibling lived that value, whatever it is, and you can point to that story.
As I was doing prep for this, I mentioned it briefly before, but the thing that really jumped off the page for me was, obviously you have a lot of business success, but the thing that kept coming up was this like really focused pursuit on building a great life, and not just for yourself, but for your kids, for your family, for others. Like it felt like early on you discovered both those tracks and never let go of one of them. And I think that's just super commendable, difficult to do. But I wonder, like when you've had these dual tracks that you've integrated, right? And had success with both and are working down a pathway with both. Like, what do you hope your legacy is, given that you've got these two big pieces of your life?
So I hope my legacy is that I was able to instill these values in my kids. Like that to me is our only job. Like I could be successful. I have lots of goals if you want to ask like, what do I want to do in business? I want to run $1 billion company. I want to do this. I want to do that. Those are not very meaningful and definitely not a legacy. Like that's how do I find accomplishment in life today? How do I find joy? What do I want to work hard on? Like how do I give back? Those are all great things. But a legacy is, what did I instill in my kids that they will then pass on to the next generation? And very specifically, it has nothing to do with money, right? Like I could pass on a lot of money to them. I'm not passing on any money to them. We'll support their health and their wellness. And obviously if there's any issue for no matter what, but they need to work hard and build their own things. The only way they do that is with the values we instill.
Wow. That's really powerful. What, I mean, I don't even know how to frame this. You've accomplished a lot. You're still a young man. You're still digging into lots of stuff. You know, through it all, what do you feel like is next for you?
So it's interesting. I'm currently on a discovery journey now to figure out what's next. And it's a hard balance because I don't want to focus on money, but that's what our society looks at as the metrics for success. So my big goal is I want to run $1 billion company or get to $1 billion exit, right? Not because I care about the dollars, but because that's how society measures our success and our value that we're giving back to society, right? So like that's a goal. I'm still on a discovery path of what that looks like and have played in lots of spaces from direct to consumer to dental to whatever else because I like learning. So the other side of that is I genuinely just love learning. It's why I write my weekly newsletter. It's why I do those things because I like the learning process. So for me, discovering a new industry, a new space is fascinating and probably has slowed me down on that journey. I probably should have focused on software as a service and just done it again and again. But for me, that's what's next. So I'm not sure. I'm discovering.
David, on your website, davidhauser.com, I know that you've got a newsletter that people plug into. Like, why would somebody plug into that newsletter? What can they get from it?
So it's been an amazing process for me now with over 15,000 people that get that email every week. I've written it every single week without a break for 4 years or 5 years now, I believe. And the process for me has been amazing. Like I've become a better sharer because of it. The weekly process of sharing my opinions and writing them down and having to commit to something has just made me a genuinely better person in life, in my relationships and business. But every week I share about 3 things that I'm thinking about, reading, doing, experimenting with. So last week wrote about productivity tips that I think are most important, NAD+, which I've been playing with from an IV infusion standpoint. And I forget the third topic, but kind of it covers health, wellness, entrepreneurship, money, financing, really in what's happening in my brain each week.
Well, I can imagine that there's a number of people listening today that are interested in kind of being on that discovery with you on that newsletter. I can imagine there's going to be people that sign up today based on what they've heard. I've found this, like personally, I think maybe, again, stage of life, just what I was learning about you coming into this, but your willingness to be so authentic and transparent and convey the lessons you've been learning in ways that make sense to people, I found really powerful and inspiring. David Hauser, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tyler. I appreciate it and really enjoyed sharing, and thank you.
Hi, Icons fans. Thank you for coming and having interest in checking out this episode. As you can imagine, so much work goes into these from our team to make this happen. And we've got a favor to ask of you. About 98% of those who come to check out this channel aren't subscribers. And as we have more people subscribed, as you can imagine, it helps us get more guests and to keep the momentum building. So if you're here for the first time or coming back and have liked one of our videos before, please subscribe and stay tuned.